Welcome to episode 5, where we are going to discuss how to respond. In general, the main objectives of any discussion, discourse, or conversation could be summarized as follows. To reach agreement. This may be because both parties are seeking truth, or because they have to design a practical way forward for action. To spell out and agree on the points of difference. This also includes spelling out the basis for the difference, values, experience, or point of view, for instance. To have as interesting a time as possible in the course of the discussion. Those are the overall strategies or objectives. Getting there involves many other activities that happen from moment to moment. That is what this episode is about. What is the immediate reaction, reply, or response to something that has been put forward? Some of the basic responses have been covered in the previous episodes. You can agree with what has been said. You might agree completely. You might agree partially. You can agree with a modification of what has been proposed. You can differ with what has been said. You need to show exactly where to differ, how to differ, and why you differ. The other party needs to know the exact nature of your difference. You can disagree with what has been said. You can disagree with facts, with values, with experience, with conclusions, and with certainty. Once again, you need to show the point of disagreement and the reasons for the disagreement. You can suggest alternatives and possibilities either to the whole proposition or to some part of it. You can indicate a point of interest and then seek to open up that point of interest. You can summarize and then repeat back what you think you heard. All these aspects have been considered in previous episodes and will also be revisited in future episodes. This episode is concerned with other aspects of a response. Clarification. There are few things more silly than two people arguing at cross purposes, because each has misunderstood what the other person is saying. This is a waste of energy. So if there is the slightest doubt, you need to ask for clarification. Is this what you said? I understood you say this. Is that correct? I'm not sure I understood what you said. Could you repeat it? I'm not totally clear about what you have just said. Could you clarify it for me? Any speaker wants to communicate and to be understood, so no one minds being asked to repeat or to clarify something. To ask for a clarification does not mean that you are stupid. On the contrary, you are showing so much interest in what is being said that you want to be sure you have understood it correctly. In asking for a clarification, you can simply ask the person to repeat, perhaps in simpler terms, what has already been said. Or you can give your version and ask whether this is indeed correct. I understand you are saying, is that really what you are saying? Support. Support goes much further than simple agreement. Agreement can be signaled with a mere nod of the head or the word yes. Support means you are going to put forward some opinion that actually makes the proposition of the other person stronger. If someone says that he is hungry, you can agree that the person probably is hungry. If you are going to give food to that person, you are going further than mere acknowledgement. You may support a proposition from your own experience. I agree with you. My experience in schools has been exactly the same, for example. You may support a proposition from your feelings or emotions. I feel exactly the same way as you do about. You may support a proposition from a shared set of values or moral principles. We may share the same values, and that is why I agree with you about. You may offer support from facts, figures, and statistics which you happen to know. There are statistics which support what you have just said. You may offer stories, examples, anecdotes, all of which support the proposition that has been put forward. What should you do if you do not agree with the line of argument, but you have evidence that supports the line of argument? Should you keep quiet, like a lawyer in court? The natural tendency would be to keep quiet. Why offer support for something with which you do not agree? Here we come to a rather important point. That point is the difference between an honest exploration of a subject and case-making. In case-making, as in a court of law, you make your case and defend it, and then you attack the case made by the other party. For centuries, we have accepted this as the best way to explore a subject. It is not. It is primitive and crude. So if you think of evidence that will support the other point of view, you put forward the evidence. Suppose a speaker is complaining of the poor quality of service in stores. You say, well, the other day I was in the store and... You then tell a tale of appalling service which supports the point of view. However, you add, there are examples of poor service, but on the whole, I think standards of service have increased considerably in the last 10 years. Examples and stories. Examples and stories that fit in with what is being discussed add life and reality to any conversation. A conversation that is carried on entirely on an abstract philosophical level can be very boring. Stories do not prove anything in the sense that statistics can prove something. A story about one enterprising and hard-working teenager does not prove that all teenagers are enterprising and hard-working. Nor does it disprove the suggestion that most teenagers are lazy and only want to have a good time. Stories can be used to attack sweeping generalizations. The generalization that all teenagers are lazy can be reduced to some teenagers seem lazy. Apart from the liveliness and actuality of stories, they illustrate possibility. A teacher told how a schoolyard bully was totally transformed by the direct teaching of thinking as a skill, not just critical thinking. I saw his letter to the teacher. In it he wrote, I used to think I was good at nothing. Now I know I'm good at thinking. And he was. Such a story does not prove anything, but it illustrates a possibility. The possibility that youngsters who are not good at the usual school subjects are not stupid at all, but potentially good thinkers. Once they realize this, their self-esteem rises and they no longer need to be bullies. Stories can illustrate principles, which is why there are the parables in the Bible. Someone once told me about some complex calculation to see how much rocket fuel had been loaded. One day, someone suggested putting in a window so that they could see the level of the fuel. The principle is that there may be simpler, more direct way of doing things. In Miletus, in ancient Greece, there was an epidemic of suicides. Young women heard that a friend of theirs had committed suicide, and they proceeded to do the same. The hysteria was stopped by an old fellow in the Senate, who introduced a law that the body of every suicide would be carried naked through the marketplace. There are many principles to be extracted from this story. One of them is the importance of vanity. There is a story about packers in the factory that used old newspapers in the packing process. The trouble was that the workers would spend too much time reading interesting bits in the old newspapers. They solved the problem, so it is said, by employing blind packers. It is important to remember that stories do not prove anything, so a string of powerful stories does not prove a point. The stories illustrate matters and also show possibilities. Build upon. You may like the point that has been made. Not only do you agree and want to provide supporting material, you actually want to build upon the point. Suppose someone is talking about the need for achievement in youngsters. In support of this point, you can offer this statistic that in the USA, 94% of youngsters rated achievement as the most important thing in their lives. This is support. Then you build upon a point and try to see where youngsters could get this sense of achievement. If a youngster was not gifted in the academic or sporting areas and did not play the guitar, where was the achievement to come from? One possible area was hobbies. Maybe a much more serious effort could be made to encourage and develop hobbies at school. Someone else might be talking about how important self-esteem is to teenagers. You agree and then build upon this by offering a new idea. Suppose a rule or suggestion was in place that required all school principals to say something positive about every child graduating from schools. Maybe the youngster was kind, or friendly, or on time, or helpful, or made people laugh. This would mean that teachers would start to look out for positive aspects outside the academic requirements. Extend. An idea is suggested. You not only accept the idea but try to extend it. The person putting forward the idea may not realize the full possibilities of the idea, so you help that person see these possibilities. Once again, this goes much further than mere agreement. There is a cooperative effort to get the most from the idea. In the Veneto region of northern Italy, there is said to be one business for every 11 people. The region is one of the most economically successful in the whole of European Union. What is the secret of setting up small businesses? One of the problems is risk. Someone suggests that low-interest loans, which are being used in Italy, would help people set up their own business. You can extend this attempt to reduce risk by suggesting another idea. When a small business collapses, the losses can be sold as a tax credit to any other company, which does not have to be in the same field. This removes some of the downside of setting up a small business. When a small business collapses, the losses can be sold as a tax credit to any other company, which does not have to be in the same field. This removes some of the downside of setting up a small business. Carry forward. This is really a version of the what-if process. You take the suggested idea and then carry it forward into practice and into the future. It is suggested that in an election, each voter should have both a positive vote and a negative vote. The negative vote would be used against a candidate and would mean, I really do not want that person in government. You imagine the idea in practice. It might be difficult for extremists or tyrants to get into power. Their supporters would vote for them, but everyone else would give them negative votes, which would then cancel the positive votes. The negative effect. People in one party would give negative votes to the most able person in the other party. Carrying something forward means looking at all the possible consequences and scenarios. It is a genuine exploration, not just a search for aspects which support a point of view. I once suggested that in the Middle East, Tuesday would be declared as a violence-free day, which would mean that people could relax on Tuesday and would look forward to Tuesday. Then they would start to ask why every day was not like Tuesday, and the impetus for peace would be increased. There is also a precedent for the idea. In the time of Muhammad, one day in the week was declared war-free, and on that day you bought and sold camels and carried out other business. In all these suggestions, there is a spirit of cooperative exploration rather than an argument battle. Modify. You can offer to modify a proposition that is put forward. You may want to modify it to remove parts you do not like, and so make the proposition more acceptable to you. You may modify the proposition to remove faults and weaknesses that occur to you. You may modify the proposition to make it even stronger. One of the simplest forms of modification is to seek to reduce a sweeping generalization to a less absolute statement. For example, all sex offenders should be castrated. This might be modified to, there may be a place for investigating hormonal treatment of some sex offenders. I once put forward an interesting idea in Northern Ireland. The suggestion was that when a political party lost an election, those who had voted for the losing party would pay 10% less income tax. The logic is that if the winning voters were to be governed by their choice of government, the losers would be compensated by paying less tax. There would need, however, to be voter registration. The idea was not well received because the Unionists, who generally formed the majority of the assembly, did not see why others would be compensated. Now that idea could be well modified to make it more practical and more acceptable. The level of tax difference could be altered. The system might only be used if the same party had been in power for more than 2 terms. It is not a matter of your idea and my idea. Once an idea has surfaced, then it is there to be jointly developed and improved. Both parties benefit from that. Now let's summarize how to respond. The overall objective of any conversation might be to agree, to disagree, to agree on the difference, and to have an enjoyable and interesting discussion. If you are in any doubt about what is being said, it is important to ask for clarification. Misunderstanding and arguing at cross purpose is a waste of time and energy. Support goes beyond agreement. You can support a point that has been made from statistics, from your own experience, from a shared set of values, and so on. Anecdotes, examples, and stories add liveliness and reality to the discussion. There may be stories from your own experience or ones you have heard and believe to be relevant. Stories do not prove anything except perhaps to challenge a generalization by showing exceptions. Stories illustrate principles, processes, and possibilities. A process might be complex to explain, can be illustrated by a simple story. You may want to go further than just agreeing with the point that is being made. You may want to build upon that point in order to take it further. You may wish to extend a suggestion by enlarging it and growing this suggestion. You can imagine an idea being put into action in the real world. You watch what might happen and describe what you see, in both a positive and negative sense. You may want to modify an idea to make it more acceptable to yourself, stronger and more practical. Once an idea has emerged, it is no longer a matter of your idea or my idea, but an idea to be improved and assessed. Instead of the usual battle of argument, there is a joint effort to explore the subject. That was the end of how to respond. In the next chapter, we are going to hear how to listen